This is what it's like after only a year. Well, I guess 2 years of work. The pond was first and then the bed around it. And then this year I was able to plant in it. And as you can see, for being the first year with plants, it looks like it's been here for years. Once these trees grow up more, they'll provide more shade for the pond, and they'll be able to give some biomass and pump up some water too in this area, as trees are living pumps. The tomatoes that I planted are doing quite well. This is our cranberry, and hopefully it'll survive here, we'll see. The soil is moist but not saturated, which is what we want. As you can see, my wife's flower is flowering beautifully. So are the pansies. I planted some spinach in here just so that we can have something besides weeds growing in this bed and grass, which I'm trying to weed out over time. This grass is a wild grass, so I'm letting it stay. And in amongst it, I happen to have a little Alberta wild rose growing, it looks like, which wasn't why I picked that. I didn't even realize that rootstock was in there. This is remnants of a cherry tree that didn't survive here. It was too wet, and hopefully my new one will survive better. I'm leaving it here because this root mass provides woody matter for the bed that will rot down and retain moisture, and as well as the roots that it has going down will allow water to soak down into the earth more once they rot down, leaving passages almost. This is basically becoming its own ecosystem. It supports itself in many ways. As you can see over here, it's kind of hard to see here, but there we go. The compost goes right down into the pond at this point. The point for this is it works like a sponge, and it soaks water up out of the pond and waters the bed. Now the one problem I have in this yard, I designed this pond down from the other pond so that when it overflowed, the water would soak down and soak into this pond and run into this pond. The problem is it doesn't run off. It soaks into the ground too much, and so the pond gets nothing. So I'm going to have to sink a line from the top pond down to the bottom pond, so when the top pond is overflowing, it'll also fill the bottom pond, thus watering this bed, meaning that in the hot, dry summer, a few good rains will give it enough water to soak out for a few weeks. So it's a garden system designed so that once it's built, it pretty much looks after itself. Some things, yeah, you have to plant seeds of. Other things that you plant so that they come back every year. Perennial gardening. Next year I'll be able to plant into this bed. For now I'm adding more organic matter every day. As you can see, these poplar logs are still growing, and they seem to like this new environment. We'll see, we might get some little tree starts off this yet. And it would be kind of a neat thing. These were trees that had been up in town for years and blew down in the windstorm. And now they're providing life and a border for a new bed. As you can see, in just a couple weeks, the cattails here have sent up a new shoot. And the grasses are sending up new shoots as well. It's the first year I've actually had tails on my cattails, which means more seeds coming off. Our blue spruce is doing better this year than it has in a couple, and I think it'll actually survive okay. When I moved here, it was pretty scraggly and had been very neglected. I added compost around the base every year, and I water it some too, but you don't want to overwater or it'll drop its taproot. This is the best success of my green ash. It's about 3 feet high now, and it's grown a lot this year alone. I'd say over a foot. You can tell how much it's grown in a year by looking at the difference in the bark. Here we have this dark brown bark, which is the bark that survived the winter. Up here, it's green still. This is the new bark from this year. So you can see it's grown almost over a foot, at least. The others had a rougher start this year, but they're coming up well, and I'm glad to see they survived the winter. My rose bush seemed to have loved the pruning. It's just covered in roses this year. As I said before, here's a little wild rose coming up beside it. I didn't know that was there. It came up on its own. I'm not sure where the seeds came from. This bed here, I have a wildflower mix. There are some weeds in there I have to weed out, but I was waiting till the plants got big enough so that I could tell the difference between the wildflowers and the weeds. Up here, we come out onto the street. Here's the new bed that I built. As you can see, the flowers are flowering, and there's some morning glories there, and there's carrots in here as well, and lots of spinach that's even going to seed already, and it'll reseed this bed for next year. Now, all this is growing quite well. The soil is fairly moist actually, and it's getting a little dry. It maybe could use some water, but as you can see, it's very organic because it was made just from compost and grass clippings. Every once in a while I just pick the weeds out, throw them down on the ground, and then they add nutrients back to the soil that they've sucked out of the ground with their roots, or out of the air if they're nitrogen bearing. Or nitrogen fixing, I should say. As you can see there, that dust coming off, it's pollen. So the bees should be quite happy in here, which is something else we want to do, is really make sure we're helping out the bees. Without them, we're in danger. As you can see, this is an example of how basic sheet mulching and permaculture can be a success, because right beside this bed, and the soil that it's right over top of, is hard and sandy and salty, and inches away it's lush organic and moist and full of life. I just fed the birds again. They seem quite happy. They enjoy these trees. They nest here as well. Mostly sparrows, but we have robins, blackbirds, red-winged blackbirds. I've seen some finches. I want to get some, I haven't gotten around to getting my hummingbird feeders set up yet at the bat house. And soon we should have a large bird population here, hopefully, and bats eating the mosquitoes. Like any birds, they seem to have a pecking order, and so the larger ones seem to get to eat more of the food out of the feeder there. The reason the feeder's over the deck like that is they're very picky eaters. They don't like to eat it off the ground. So at least on the deck, half of it lands there, and the bottom of the pecking order has something to feed on, while the others fight over the top feeder. There is a chance of some of this growing, and if it does, cool. I've got something that grows my own birdseed. As you can see down here, I've got a pea plant coming up. There's several planted here, and they should grow up the tree, and I'll be able to harvest peas out of my trees. Meg's enjoying the shade, looking around at the beds. As you can see, as we go down this little path, we're on the inside of the potato ring here. These potatoes are doing quite well this year. Here's a spinach plant in the middle of the potatoes, and it's grown very tall and went to seed, trying to compete with the potatoes, but not produce much of a leaf crop. So we might get some seeds of it, but we want seeds that are from plants that produce a lot of leaves, so that we get the best of them. I'll have to stack some more compost on here. The thing you want to watch for with potatoes is to make sure that none of them grow out of the soil where the sun can hit them, or you get green spots on your potatoes that are actually poisonous, so you can lose a potato that way. So if you keep covering them, the potatoes keep growing up, and you can get more potatoes.